In 2020, the international air travel suffered from a dramatic 60% drop, according to the January report of the International Civil Aviation Organization. The crisis seems far from over, but more needs to be done to bring the aviation industry back on track. I'm here to talk today with Peter Griffiths, Director General of the Aviation Administration of Kazakhstan. Mr. Griffiths, thank you for joining us today. So the Aviation Administration was created back in 2019. If you could tell us about some of the achievements of the organization so far.
I think the greatest achievement is finding sufficient people here in Kazakhstan that we can turn into regulators. It's testament to all the people that we've managed to recruit to come and work at AAK, but they're not only dedicated to the job that they're doing, but they've shown sufficient resilience to go through a period of COVID, as well as going through some training to turn them into regulators fit for managing the aviation industry in Kazakhstan. You'll see on the slides that I've got in front of you that there's quite a lot of work that has been done. So in terms of the overall performance of the organisation, there's over 60 different aviation entities here in Kazakhstan which have been looked at by us. Following the Bec Air accident, we had an instruction from the President to have a look in detail at every airline to ensure that we didn't have further problems. Teams have been doing that, and they've been involved in over 500 inspections of different entities, ranging from the airports right the way through to looking at all of the individual airlines and most of the aircraft that we operate here in Kazakhstan. Looking at their licensing right the way through to how they operate their safety management systems. And I'm pleased to say that all of the operating entities now are all operating at a reasonable level. There's still more that we can do, but it's now been demonstrated that the airlines are all operating at a reasonably good standard. We've still got a little bit more work to do with our staff here. It'll take about another year to finish all of their training. But we're optimistic that that's going to work quite well.
So the Aviation Administration uses the European approach to safety management based on the British model. If you could explain us, what does it mean in particular?
Yeah, I wish it was that simple, but unfortunately it's not. The British model is about making sure that we deliver efficiency. So one of the things that I'm pretty sure was looked for when SIP 68 was created was the ability to manage quite a large aviation system with quite a small team. So developing that efficiency is about getting the right operating model. If you think that the UK is a large organisation that's been around for just over 1,000 years, it's got a well-established mechanism. Try doing that in a country that's only 30 years old and has a different history. So we've adapted the model so that it delivers the principles of what the UK system looks to deliver, to start developing the mechanisms to develop the efficiencies that we're looking for. So that means that we're able to manage more with a small team. But the third thing is to make sure that our people are educated to a level where they can operate in an international context. That's something that Kazakhstan was quite deficient in. When you look at EASA, it's about standardisation. Now this is where life becomes particularly complex. We have two different types of aircraft here in Kazakhstan. We have the European aviation aircraft, the Boeing 737s, the 76s, the Airbuses that you see Air Astana flying around with. And these are operated very much in accordance with the European aviation safety standards. But we still have quite a large post-Soviet fleet, and that in itself requires a different technique to manage it. So we try not to mix the two up, so that we can still operate AN2s and Mil-8 helicopters, which have been extremely efficient for the country, at the same time as operating modern aircraft. So we have a twin-track process for dealing with regulation.
What are some of the measures that the Aviation Administration has been taking to achieve an 80% compliance with the International Civil Aviation Organization requirements so far?
Well, one of the main things is to make sure that we link internationally to all of the main constituents of global aviation practice. So establishing a very good rapport and link with ICAO was first part of that, but also to link into our European partners, as well as continuing to work with our CIS states and Russia. So linking internationally was a key part of that. The first thing that aided us in that process was the achievement of observer status to something called ECAC, which is the European Civil Aviation Conference. This is a Western organisation where all the Director Generals of aviation get together and talk about the strategic problems that we have within the aviation programme. Kazakhstan was outside of that, and we managed to obtain that observer status very quickly, even in a COVID environment, which I'm very pleased that we managed to get for Kazakhstan. But we're also working towards achieving further mechanisms. So you've heard us talk about FAA Cat 1, the ability for Kazakhstan to be able to fly directly from Nur-Sultan or Almaty straight to New York. This is a difficult thing to achieve. It requires a lot of interaction between us and the United States. And we've been well on the way to building those mechanisms to ensure that we can deliver FAA Cat 1 when we need it around about 2023, 2024. The next step along the way is that in August we will have ICAO coming to pay us a visit. They'll be carrying out what's called an ICBM review of where Kazakhstan is. And we're hoping that our scores will have improved significantly so that we can demonstrate tracking towards that overall compliance level that has been set as a target by the government.
The Aviation Administration has recently signed an agreement with the aviation authorities of Ireland. So what does it bring for the development of the industry here in Kazakhstan?
Well, one of the things that the government was looking for when it set up the Aviation Administration was to bring aircraft which were registered abroad, generally registered in Aruba, which is the P4 on the tail of the aircraft, to bring them back into Kazakhstan so that when you were travelling on an aircraft which was operated by a Kazakh operator, that was registered here in Kazakhstan. And that's an overall objective. To do that is actually quite difficult when you're dealing with such a diverse fleet. So whilst we can do it for some of the less technical aircraft, for doing it with Air Astana's fleet, this was quite a big ask for the team here. It would take 2 to 3 years for my team here to get up to the right level to be able to regulate those fleets properly, and they would have to go through an extensive training program with the EASA. That didn't happen because of the COVID regulations, and that we weren't able to travel and make contact with our European aviation safety colleagues. So we decided that we would ask Air Astana if they were willing to move their fleet. They indicated that they were, and they told us that Ireland would be acceptable for them. So we set up the agreement with Ireland, which does two things. First of all, it brings the aircraft one step closer to being Kazakh aircraft. They are established under a European Aviation Safety Agency approach, and my teams will all be trained by the Irish regulator not only to carry out the work on behalf of Ireland, but also to work alongside the inspectors, gaining knowledge as they go. So this is an accelerator mechanism for my own people here who will have the ability to interact with a world-class regulator.
And along with this agreement, what stands next in international partnerships?
So the next international partnerships that we're working on is to improve the relationships with our next door neighbour, Russia. There are some agreements that we quite like to put in with them, and there's some draft agreements which we now have with our colleagues in Russia. And this is a great step forward. As Central Asia is the gateway not only to Western Europe but also to the Far East and our colleagues to the north, it's essential that Kazakhstan works with all of our neighbours and not just with Western Europe. So it's important that we have the right mechanisms in place to exchange information quickly and efficiently, so that if Russian pilots wish to fly here in Kazakhstan, we have the ability to talk to our Russian colleagues and get information and prove those quickly. So there's a number of agreements in the process of being looked at. The Irish agreement was the one that we've done recently. There's a new one which has been negotiated with the European Aviation Safety Agency on the back of that agreement. FAA Cat 1 will be the next very large agreement we're looking to achieve, and that's scheduled for 2023.
So we've been for a very unprecedented year with the COVID-19 outbreak, and the consequences are still there. How would you assess the impact of the outbreak on the aviation industry in the globe and in Kazakhstan as well?
Well, here in Kazakhstan, we've not been so badly affected as our colleagues in the rest of the world. But let's not underestimate the problem that we've got with the aviation industry. It is unprecedented. Since 1945, this is the largest downturn that we have had in the aviation industry, with losses in the billions now. So here in Kazakhstan, we took a short-term hit by managing the situation to try and contain the issue to within Kazakhstan and to reduce the imports of the virus. We worked with ICAO extensively through the COVID crisis to develop mechanisms to allow us to operate aviation safely again as soon as was possible. It meant that our aviation industry was only out of service for around about 80 days. Here we are nearly 18 months on since the start of the crisis, and globally that's not the case. So as you can see from the slide that I'm showing you, the downturn in not just domestic traffic but also total passenger loads and freight has been the most extreme that we have ever seen. Recovery of that will take quite some time, but you're looking at nearly 900 billion in losses since we started. Here in Kazakhstan, we have losses of about 350 billion tenge. So we're not quite as bad as the rest of the world, but it's still a substantial loss to the industry. It will take quite some time to recover from it.
So we also have seen how the COVID-19 outbreak has revealed the many problems in many industries worldwide. And I'm just interested, how will it reshape the development of the industry moving forward?
I think one of the key areas that you'll see changes in the aviation industry is in the environmental area. Environmentalists have been tracking very carefully the effects of the downturn in global aviation. And if they're able to demonstrate that global warming is badly affected by the aviation industry, you can see that in the upcoming COP26 discussions in November, there will be quite a lively debate about whether or not it's safe to actually bring back aviation in the same way that it was. There are already estimates that not all of the aviation system will return, and that there may be interaction with some of the government agencies who try to limit the return of aviation. Here in Kazakhstan, that poses us a problem because the fastest way to get around this vast country that we all live in is by aviation. Recently there's been some changes to airports as they do developments in those airports. So we've seen work being proposed for Uralsk and Petropavlovsk, and during those times the airports are not operating. And when that happens, people have to travel by car or by train, and I know from the complaints that we get that they're not happy about it, but they understand that we need to carry out that work in order to improve safety standards and the overall infrastructure that's there. So we recognise that aviation is a key constituent here in Kazakhstan.
And what about the plans for digitization so far?
So digitalisation is an interesting issue. One, because we very much support it. On the slide in front of you at the moment, you can see one of our biggest digitalisation projects at the moment, Project Sunflower. Sunflower was actually created to answer three questions. Where are our aircraft, what are they doing, and who are they doing it for? And this was because we had a number of aircraft with Kazakhstan registrations operating in other countries. We never saw them. They were not really part of Kazakhstan, and some were carrying out some actions which were extremely criminal in the way that they operated. Not only embarrassing for Kazakhstan, where people were using the flag of Kazakhstan to do their work, but also it made life extremely difficult for us to regulate them and ensure that they were operating correctly. So, for example, we have an aircraft operating in the Antarctic at the bottom end of Chile, which was carrying passengers which it was not allowed to do. So this was something which nobody was aware of. So we have created the digitalisation project not only to provide you with better services, but also to improve our overall surveillance of what our aircraft are doing. Now, the sort of digitalisation that is currently on the work here is improving the licensing so that we can digitalise all of the licensing, to digitalise all of the issue of the AOC. So where it has been done in the past through eGov, it's only part of the equation. There's a lot more that goes to it. So we need to improve all of that. So we're hoping that within the next 2 years, all the plans that we're making at the moment will come to fruition, and you will see a highly digitised regulator managing your aviation system. It will make it quicker, more efficient, and much better for the end customer, the passengers that are travelling.
Thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome.